Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. I'm your host, Alison Price, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Arwynne O'Neill.
Hi, Alison. It's great to be here again.
So nice to have you once more. Now, in this episode, we're going to be doing a chart of a very famous woman, Barbie.
Yes.
So for those of you who want to maybe cast the chart and follow along, I'm going to give you the chart details to start with, and then we'll get into it. So the birth date for Barbie is 10 a.m., March the 9th, 1959, New York City, New York, USA. Those are our chart details. And this is returning an ascendant of 9 degrees Gemini.
Yes.
Okay.
And that is an A-rated chart, by the way, on astro.com, Astro Databank.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Arwynne, would you like to share with us a little bit about Barbie's background and her details?
Sure. So Barbie is a fashion doll created by the American businesswoman and former Mattel CEO, one of the CEOs of Mattel, Ruth Handler. And in 1956, she traveled with her husband to Europe, and she had noticed that her daughter was always playing with these fashion paper dolls. And her daughter was named Barbara, by the way, which is, of course, part of the lore. But she noticed that her daughter really liked to play with these paper dolls and dress them up in, women's clothes, and didn't really like playing with the baby dolls, which were much more, they were the only thing you could play with as a little girl. There were blocks and unisex toys, but basically if you had dolls back in the 50s, it was baby dolls. And Ruth Handler watched her daughter play with these paper dolls and thought that she would like to, bring home a doll that was like an adult doll for her child to play with, because she found this doll in Germany, and this was called the Bild Lily, and that's spelled B-I-L-D. It's based on the newspaper Bild in Germany, and it was a satirical comic strip that was actually quite adult-oriented about this kind of gold-digging little showgirl kind of thing.
Yeah. And
they created a few dolls that were marketed to adult men that were that looked exactly like what Barbie looks like now. So basically, Ruth Handler brought 3 of these dolls home, gave one to her daughter. Her daughter was thrilled, could not have been happier. Immediately proceeded to dress them up, as we all did, as little girls.
Yes.
And the rest is history. Eventually Mattel was sued, but won, and for ripping off their copyright or whatever. I think it was like $21,000 later that they paid for the copyright to, this German company. Oh. And now they own it outright, blah, blah, blah. Well, they've gone on to sell billions of dollars worth of Barbie's merchandise. All the dolls like Ken, which was introduced 2 years later, Alan, Stacy, Skipper, tons of dolls followed, tons of clothes, over 200 jobs that she's had. This Barbie character. She's been a blonde, she's been a brunette, she's been every race, she's been every nationality. When I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, they had the Barbies of the world, and I had Parisian Barbie, who was like sort of a strawberry blonde with like this little can pink and black lace dress. She was my favorite for a while, until Radiant and Red Barbie came out. That was in, I think, 1989 or 90. And that was like a curly red-haired Barbie, which I had curly red hair at the time. Very like early 90s sort of look. So Barbie has done it all. And her chart definitely reflects that, which we will get into. But I thought it was important to get a little groundwork. And I think most people probably know a lot about Barbie. But there's the background. And of course, last year in 2023, the Barbie movie came out with Margot Robbie, who couldn't have been more perfect, and right. Ryan Gosling playing Ken. Shout out to Ken. This is actually being recorded before the Oscars, but he's been nominated, which is weird. I'm not going to get too much into it, but
for best actor?
Oh God, it's kind of silly. I mean, honestly, it's a great, funny kind of movie. There's amazing art direction, but I don't think anyone really deserves it. It's not an Oscar movie. It's not that kind of movie. It's a funny movie, and it kind of made itself out to be a bit of a feminist manifesto, which is absurd because no, that's just, it didn't do a good job with that as far as I'm concerned. But it was funny, and I thought the performances were great. The acting was all, not Oscar worthy, but really good.
You had to have first.
Yeah, sorry, nope. but hilarious, and the songs were great. I like the Ken song. The Ken song was awesome.
So can we just go back to the beginning when you were a young girl and you got your first Barbie? And were you designing her fashions? Were you living her dreams? How were you interacting?
Hilariously, my mother was a complete hippie. She did not want me to have a Barbie. I had to campaign. I had to, make picket signs and get a petition going in order for her to even let me play with Barbies. And I had to promise that she wasn't going to scar me for life and make me, have body image issues and eating disorders. And, my mother was concerned about the right stuff. But, she eventually relented, and I named my first Barbie after her. It was a Malibu Barbie. Back then they had, she had a tan, and she had little spray on tan lines, which was hilarious from her bikini. Yeah. You could scrape them off with your nail though. So that was kind of weird. And then just tons of Barbies followed after that. And for a while, my mother was actually making doll clothes. We used to go to doll shows, and that was amazing. I found it just really inspiring, and also just a little strange that there were tons and tons of grown-up women who made their life and career making doll clothes or selling dolls or collecting dolls. That was really inspiring for me as
as a child. I had an aunt one Christmas who created or knitted or prepared me a full ensemble for the Barbie I had, and she put it in this box that kind of opened like a suitcase, and she'd knitted a little cardigan, she'd sewn a little dress, she'd crocheted some gloves. I mean, those were the days where, and that this full outfit thing that she spent obviously all year making for me, because I was the only niece within the family, and everything else was boys, and she made all this stuff for me for my Barbie that I had.
Lucky you.
But I had it was the British Airways Barbie. It wasn't called British Airways then, it was called British Overseas Air Commission, and BOAC.
Wow. Yeah.
And they used to print that on the side of their bags, and she had her bag, and her little pillbox hat.
Oh, how cute.
And of course, it used to be known as Better on a Camel because of the service in the airline.
What?
The BOAC. So anyway, she was the air hostess Barbie. That was the one I had, yeah.
That's awesome.
We're talking years ago, right?
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I had dozens and tons of.
Oh, I just
Ken
had
dolls. I had,
and there was a rocking horse.
Collection. Yeah.
Or a horse, actually. I think it was a real horse, wasn't it? Well, a plastic regular horse.
Oh, yeah. They had horses. Apparently,
houses.
Had more than 200 different pets. There's been, we could go on with the knickknacks that she's had, the dream house, the townhouse. I had the townhouse, but not the dream house, because we always lived in smaller.
And there was a swimming pool attachment.
Oh, yeah. The swimming pool would have been great. I didn't have enough space for that. But yeah, what we lacked in space, I made up for in creativity, I guess you could say. She had lots of sleeping bags made out of leg warmers, because this was the 80s. We had lots of leg warmers.
And do you think that Barbies are still being sold today to teenage girls or young girls?
I think there's been a resurgence, sure.
Yeah.
Apparently the sales went way, way down for some reason, between 2014 and 2016.
Oh.
That's what they say. But then they've sold, in 2020, $1.35 billion worth of Barbie dolls and accessories. That was their best sales growth in over 2 decades. So, yeah, they're still doing pretty well. Yeah, and you can definitely expect that to go up since the movie, of course.
Amazing.
A new generation, I would think.
So it really is a cultural thing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because there is a feminist aspect, certainly, to the story. Ruth Handler was an absolute feminist icon in a way. She was a CEO. She was a creator. She didn't ever want to have Barbie get married or have children. So there's been, babies that were marketed. Skipper was the younger sister.
I didn't know that.
She's had bride dresses and stuff over the years, but according to, the canon, she's never married Ken. That's just, it's her boyfriend, not husband, never children. And that's because
That's how she kept her figure.
Yeah, exactly. Ruth Handler was militant, that she, never wanted to reinforce the idea that young girls should aspire only to marriage and motherhood, because that was the only thing when she was growing up that it
was the only thing.
So instead of that, she's been, and this is, I'm going to just speed through a few of the 200 careers she's had. So the first was fashion designer. That was in 1960. Flight attendant, as you say, air hostess. She's been a nurse. She's been in every sport that you can think of. Tennis player, hockey player, astronaut, Olympic skier, Olympic everything. She's been a teacher. She's been a computer programmer. She's been a veterinarian and came with all of her pets. She's been a rock star, a travel agent with her own little travel agency, which is hilarious, an ice cream cart owner and a food truck owner.
Wow.
A game show host, and that also came with its own set, which is bizarre. That was in 1987. She's been a UNICEF ambassador, a figure skater. She's been every form of military person.
Wow.
She's been a business executive, a rapper, which is really hilarious, in 1992. And I mean, I'm going to show you the picture. You can look it up yourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Barbie rapper. It's hilarious.
We'll put that image on the blog post.
Yeah. She's been a doctor. Of course, she's been a police officer. And as I said, every nationality has been represented.
Yes.
So, all of that
That's
stuff.
That's right. Yeah, the Japanese and everything.
Oh, yeah. And wonderful, outfits. Wonderful, traditional garb of every different type of nation. She's been... all of the designers, the major designers, especially Bob Mackie and Oscar de la Renta, the big...
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Tons of designer outfits. Tons of... She's been... Oh, yes. I love the Starfleet one. There's the whole Star Trek
the Star Trek Barbie. Oh, good heavens.
From the old Star Trek. So she's
it's the only one that counts.
Mini skirt. Yes. And she's an engineering officer, a.k.a. a red shirt. Shout out to my nerds.
I'm amazed you know that.
Are you kidding? This is the Venn diagram of my nerdhood. Barbies and...
Meets Star Trek.
Oh,
okay.
Hell yeah. And she's, of course, been every form of musician. She's been a detective.
Oh, she had a piano. I remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. She's been a matador, which is fascinating. A pilot, because, of course, you can't just be an air hostess. You have to also be a pilot. And she's been a United States presidential candidate. That was in 2000.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yes. Train conductor, which is kind of weird. Cowgirl. Film producer.
Everything you could ever want to be.
Really?
I wonder if she's been a podcaster or a YouTuber.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh, God, influencer. I'm sure she will be if she hasn't already. Yeah. Oh, she's been a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. That's cool.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, anything that you can think of, she's probably done it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think that since she was back then, that what she's representing has changed, or is it still the same message?
Oh my gosh. Well, when I was growing up, there was a commercial and the jingle was, "We girls can do anything." Right, Barbie? So right. I think that's always been the message. And it's gotten just more and more over the years as women kind of did actually, go into those fields and expand their horizons. And yeah. I think the message has always kind of been the same, but it's definitely...
But women are strong.
It's changed with the times. Yeah, women are strong. They can do what they want. You have options. Yes. You don't have to marry Ken if you don't want to.
That's right.
But the thing, too, is it played to girls' creativity, I think. Right. Because the whole point was not... here's a doll for you to take care of and be the mommy to. This is a little representative of you. And of course, some people would say, well, that's problematic, body image, blah, blah, blah. But, let's not lay that on little girls. Little girls want to play with, a doll that looks like a little grown up. And that's back then too. You didn't have, this was the beginnings of television even. Yes. You didn't have that many role models and stuff. You had
Bewitched.
Bewitched. Yay. I dream of Jeannie. Yeah, I'm sure she's been a genie for sure.
All that kind of thing.
Yeah. But having a career, having all these different options was revolutionary at the time, you know,
right.
And that I think is a feminist thing for sure.
Yeah.
And it's just what feminism has changed so much since Barbie started.
Exactly.
And we can talk about too. I mean, once we get into the chart, it's fascinating because what I like, you know, in one of my favorite things in astrology is generational markers.
Yes.
And Pluto had just gone into Virgo. It was at 2 degrees Virgo. And that is a generational marker that begins for what I'm thinking is the like feminism, really. I mean, the pill was introduced.
Yes.
Masters and Johnson's sex study came out right around that time, like informing everybody that, oh, women have sexual desires and blah, blah, blah. I'm watching Masters of Sex right now, the TV show. Excellent, excellent show. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it, the 2013 to 2018 show. But,
okay, so this is what you're saying is generational because Pluto has left Leo, which was a different,
the baby
older
boomer generation.
That was the boomers, and come into Virgo. And what do we name this generation at this point to be the?
I mean, I think because it was a really long transit in
Generation
Leo.
X.
It's the beginning of Generation X.
Okay.
I think that the first few years, really, I mean. The first few, people say Generation X, they kind of moved the boomers up to like 1964 to 65 now, which is ridiculous. I think baby boom is
astrologically, it's ridiculous.
It's 1937 to 1958 was Pluto in Leo. Yes. That's the baby boom.
They're the boomers. Exactly.
Because it started right before World War II. It went through World War II. And then when the GI Bill and everyone came back and started the suburbs and, you know, mass consumerism and commercialization and Mad Men and all that stuff, that's Pluto in Leo. That's the baby boomers.
Yeah.
And the next generation after that is Generation X. Each generation
X
is 20
Pluto
years.
Virgo,
there's some astrological overlap, but really that's the beginning of Generation X for sure.
Yeah, we definitely need to do an episode on the generations. I think we've spoken about it in the past.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot to be said about it. Interesting.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say Barbie is Generation X at all, but she's at the leading edge of it. You know, she's the very tail end of the boomers. But that Pluto in Virgo marks her as that beginning of the feminism. You know, the revolutions that happened in like the sexual revolution and
we're talking 59 here, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's turn our attention then to Barbie's chart.
Absolutely.
Which has some features we're just going to highlight, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting, too, her quote-unquote mother, Ruth Handler, Scorpio. Just an interesting note there. November 4th, 1916. So Ruth Handler, Scorpio, the inventor of Barbie.
Okay.
Yeah.
1916, you say,
1916, So anyway, Barbie's
chart.
She is a double Pisces.
Double Pisces.
With Gemini rising.
Gemini rising.
Gemini rising is amazing. Yes. It's funny, when I first thought about doing Barbie's chart, I wrote to my mother. I'm always texting her, and I said, thinking about doing Barbie's chart, what rising do you think she has? And my mother said, my mother also has Gemini rising. She said, oh, Gemini rising for sure. And I looked it up, and of course, I'm not the first person who has had this thought. Sure enough, the chart's out there. It's A rating, and Gemini rising. So I mean, what else could it be with all of those interests, with 200 jobs?
And everyone knows her name, right?
Yeah, 100%. But Pisces, I think that's fascinating. And in the 10th, is it in the 10th? No, 11th house.
11th house.
Yeah, so the sun and moon conjunct in Pisces in the 11th house.
Yeah, so that's a new moon as well, which is good. So in the 11th house, we have
the sun and moon conjunct in Pisces. And then in Aries, in also the 11th house, we have Venus and Mercury and the South Node.
Yeah.
And Eris.
And Eris.
Yeah, because Eris is always in Aries in this century. And so that's an interesting thing, too. We'll get into this because we also have Mars conjunct the Ascendant in the first house.
Yes.
And that is in Gemini.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of femininity with the Pisces, and that strong Venus in the 11th house conjunct Mercury. Yeah, it's widely conjunct.
It is.
Yeah, it's widely conjunct Mercury.
Widely.
I mean, so that's a lot of feminine right there. But then we also have the fact that they're in Aries and that Mars in the first house. So there's a lot of masculine energy too, or a lot of independent energy anyway.
Independence, yes.
It's just it is an incredibly strong and independent chart. This is a pioneer.
Yes, and that's what she was, and still probably is.
Absolutely.
Because every generation that comes up discovers her all anew.
Yeah.
Mm.
Interesting. And those Pisces planets, I mean, we've talked a bit about Pisces already this year, and I think we're leaning into a lot of Piscean energy right now because we are actually going into the Pisces time of year. But it's neat because I think we did get a bit of pushback from some Pisceans in our audience who said, you never talk about Pisces. Everyone neglects the Pisces.
What about me?
What about me? But it's really, I mean, it's almost contradictory. All of this Aries and Gemini stuff, contrasted with Sun and Moon in Pisces. But then it's also, Pisces takes the form of everything, kind of. It's at the end of the zodiac.
Yes.
And it sort of takes the form of whatever it's poured into, which is very much Barbie. Barbie is what you project onto her. She's whatever the little girl who's playing with her wants her to be.
Yes.
And whatever we see in our society and in the current way that women are seen.
Yes. And it's changed since her birth chart.
100%.
From the jobs and the hairdos she had back then.
Oh yeah, fashion model to president. Yes. The presidential candidate, anyway.
Well, what was that the year Hillary was running as well?
It was 2000. Hillary's always been running.
Oh, I see. What, and she still is, you mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. So what do you see when you, if this was a person who called you for an interpretation, what would be the first?
First thing I'm going to be looking at is the Ascendant. It's Gemini. We want to say, where's Mercury? There it is in the 11th house. In Aries, so she's going to have a forthright message. Mm-hmm. And she's more likely to stay on her message regardless and not be swayed or manipulated mindfully by others because the Mercury is in Aries. So she would have her opinion and as I say, stay true to, not that I'm not saying she wouldn't change her mind, but you wouldn't be just influencing her left, right and centre saying, oh, do this, oh, do that. She would have her own thoughts as well. I do like the new moon. That is always, and it's very tight, that's always a good position for the moon. It's the sun will dominate there, but the moon is not balsamic. It's actually new moon, which is great. So that's just moved past there. So technically, the moon was exactly new moon, probably in the night before she was born, if you will.
Yeah.
So that's always an interesting thing. Her most elevated planet there is Chiron, which may mean that this has not been an easy road.
Yeah.
There have been challenges, and she may have had to explain herself further but she's still not going to waver.
Yeah.
But she may still have had to have explained herself there too.
Yeah. And Chiron is in Aquarius, which is interesting.
Yes.
Because she was certainly an innovation.
At the time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Previously to Barbie, little girls were just, as you said, they had a baby doll to care for because that's what women did. You looked after your family, your babies, and this is what you needed to know how to do.
Yeah.
So everyone had got 9 kids.
Yeah.
Until the pill came along when Pluto went into Virgo. Yeah. That changed everything, right? Because no doubt she was on the pill. Right?
In the Barbie movie, there's a bit of I wouldn't want to call it a 2001 homage, but it's there's a bit of a thing about the baby doll being kind of cast out into the ether when Barbie emerges on the scene and the baby dolls are cast aside.
Yeah, because we can do more than just bring up babies and be baby making machines. Yeah. So strong planets here is definitely Saturn in Capricorn, and I believe it might be the final dispositor. Oh no, Jupiter's also in Sagittarius. Yeah, this is that generation where those two planets of give and take are in their own sign, so they're both strong.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so there will be a Jupiter tree of stuff on the one side, and all the Pisces planets will come under Jupiter. Under that kind of the Jupiter side, if you will. And then there will then be the Saturn side, which has only got Chiron in it. So that's a much smaller influence, but still independent of the Jupiter. Yeah.
And the Jupiter is, of course, in the 6th house, which is all of those careers.
all those little, she's the spokesperson for the air hostesses, or what do we call them now? The
flight attendants.
Flight attendants, yes.
Yeah. And of course the veterinarian with all the 1,000 different pets and
all the things. I mean, it's a big thing. You've got Uranus is still there in Leo, but that now is in the 3rd house, right on the IC, and it's retrograde. So I would put that in. That is a quieter Uranus coming through there. But there are a couple of major aspect patterns I just want to draw your attention to. She's got this Thor's hammer, which is, it's the square between Pluto and Jupiter coming up to, and they're both pointing towards Venus.
Oh, interesting.
So this is a challenging pattern where you've got Venus, which is her femininity, is being challenged by Pluto and Jupiter at the same time.
Yeah.
And it will be something that will be rigid, that she may not be able to, I want to say, bend on it because it's within this chart.
Yeah.
So of all the challenges she's had in her life, it will be towards Venus and what that represents.
Yeah. That is great. That's really interesting.
Which is kind of interesting. So it's not that... I wouldn't say that she was a beauty, even though maybe she was. That was not the thing. The thing was, is this a representation of women?
Right.
And it has changed, and it has been forced to change and transform and grow with the Pluto and the Jupiter coming through there.
Right. And that the Jupiter being all those careers, all those interests, all those ideas.
Yeah.
And Pluto, I think, is about her origin because it's in the 4th house.
Yes.
And that's about her being based on this weird like gold digger caricature from this German newspaper that was marketed towards dirty old men.
Right.
And that's like the weird...
She's risen above all
That's
that.
like the weird dad no one talks about when Bruce Handler is like this feminist icon, mom, powerhouse lady.
She's risen above it. She's transformed as the phoenix.
Yeah. Come
out of there and is coming forward. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then the other major aspect pattern is a quintile pointer. So this is an interesting one. You don't, if you're not looking for them, you'll miss it. You've got Saturn is quintile, both the sun and the moon, that conjunction there.
Right.
And then they are both, all three of those are then biquintile to Uranus. So this is totally separate and running. I wouldn't say it's running concurrently, but the Thor's hammer will dominate. But this is one where creativity and originality is a theme in her life.
Oh, yeah.
Once more, pointing to this Uranus in Leo in the 3rd retrograde, which is not very well placed for voicing things out. But on the side of being, what is Uranus representing? It's the rebel. It's the teenager,
it's
the perpetual teenager.
Right. Yeah. Especially in the 3rd house. It's like this, hey, we girls can do anything.
Exactly.
That baby feminist thing that I found kind of galling about the movie. But we all went through that phase where, as tween girls or however old, barking about our little, discovery about girl power. And that has been Barbie's lot for the last 60-some years. And
so these quintiles, they always represent a creative genius, which is not necessarily always, but it tends towards artistic and musical and writing where you are creating stuff and putting it out there.
Yeah.
And I don't really, clearly we've got Barbie pink, right?
Yeah.
This is now a color.
Oh, yeah.
Barbie pink. And that would be something that would come through from that particular.
Oh, yeah. And there's this fashion trend now called Barbie core, which is from the movie. Yeah.
Oh.
I was skating with my friend and we both at the time had blonde hair. Last summer, blonde-ish, blonde adjacent, whatever. We're skating around and not only like 1 or 2 times, but multiple times had people go, "Hi, Barbie," as we're skating by. Yes. And if you've seen the movie, you know why that's funny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
There we go.
But, and were you wearing a Barbie pink skater skirt?
No, we were just on skates and we had blondish hair and
okay.
we were looking fierce. I will admit it. We were looking pretty cool.
Yeah. What color are your skates?
Oh, my skates are actually sort of aqua.
Aqua.
Not to be confused with Aqua, the band that did the parody Barbie song back in the 90s, which is an awesome song, by the way.
And I know last summer they had glasses frames in Barbie pink because my daughter got some. She had to have the Barbie pink frames.
Amazing. Yeah.
And when we went down to, Barely Nelson here in Kits, and that was the last pair of pinks. They said they just sold out and she snapped them up.
Just snapped them up for sure.
And I was like, why do you want these pink glasses? No, they're not. I'm wearing, chartreuse. I mean, but it's just the way that things have come through. That colour itself is totally Barbie.
Absolutely. Right? It's like a Tiffany blue. It's some
Yes,
Barbie pink.
yes. And I wonder if
Sure.
she's got a font as well then. There probably is a Barbie font.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's interesting. So these are the things what I talk about where we look at these. You don't often see these because the orbs are very tight. It's 2 degrees on these aspects of the quintiles in the quintile group. And it's pointing to one of the planets, and in this case it's to the actual Uranus.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah,
and of course, I mean, just the pop culture tie-ins. There have been. This latest movie last year is only the most recent of dozens of movies and songs and musicals.
I'm a Barbie girl.
That's the one.
Whoever sang. I don't know what that was.
That's Aqua. That's
is it? Okay.
Yeah.
What do I know? Arwynne's really
that song though. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is great. So, of course, one could dig a lot more into her chart, but these are the standout things that you'd want to be discussing first.
Yeah,
the main points.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Arwynne, I know you've been looking into this a little deeply, and you've written a recent article. Can you tell us about that?
I did. I wrote an article as I said, I was a little bit annoyed at the movie, and I really wanted to like it because, of course, I was obsessed with Barbies as a kid. Mm-hmm. But I just the whole sort of proto-feminist message that I didn't think landed well, and the whole, like, it's impossible to be a woman speech, which everybody loved, which I found really insipid and self-pitying and just outdated and kind of damaging and wrong. But I wrote a big blog post about it, and you can find it on MsPink.net. And if you agree or disagree, please let me know. Of course, if you disagree, keep the word count short.
So you are writing about your reflections on the movie from last year.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's called Battle in Barbie Land.
Woohoo.
Yes.
By Arwynne O'Neill. This is great. Well, I'll put a link to that below the podcast.
That'd be great.
And to the blog post that we may put up for this episode.
Yeah.
And that would, I have read it. It'd be interesting for other people to go down there and should I say, understand where you're coming from with your thoughts and whatnot.
Yeah.
And we can put the chart up there as well.
Yeah.
I think this also just, this type of interpretation or this type of topic shows that everything has a birth chart.
Yes.
It's not just us humans.
Right.
Barbie has one, and of course all the countries have one. Your dog's got one.
Yeah. Anything that had an inception moment.
Yes.
Can have a chart.
Your car, your house, all of those things have a chart. And
if you know the moment that your car rolled off the assembly line or the moment you purchased it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and if you're buying secondhand, it's the moment you get the keys, then it's yours. So yeah. Same with a house. When you're purchasing a house, your house would have a chart too. But
I've seen some fascinating articles too about fictional characters where it's not just the time that, when the show was released. With movies, sometimes they do that. They'll actually go with the first showing of the movie when it was released and say, why this movie had such a cultural effect and blah, blah, blah. And one of the interesting ones, actually, I just also did a blog post about zombies, which talked about the Night of the Living Dead, which came out in 1968. And it talks about how the very first print of the movie was completed on the same day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. So they were driving to New York with the first printing of the movie when they heard the news.
Right.
So there's this huge cultural sort of connection with the civil rights movement and with the war in Vietnam and all the stuff that was going on in 1968. And this movie that everyone was like, this is an evil movie with murder and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, yeah, but you're seeing on the news, like, people being murdered and burned by napalm and all of this stuff, and that's real life, and that's not offensive to you. So anyway, you can do a chart about anything that has an actual birth date. That's right, because
I think this is the first time, well, apart from our ChatGPT stuff,
right?
This is the first time we've done one for a toy, technically. And there's bound to be others. I mean, Rubik's Cube comes to mind. I don't know when that came out, but that is still going strong.
1980, was it?
Oh,
like that?
Well, we'll look into that maybe if we're going to go down that road.
Right.
But I think as female archetypes might be kind of it. There might be others we can drum up in the future, but yeah. So this has been interesting, and I think the trigger for this particular episode was the Barbie movie that came out last year.
Yeah.
And I know you're quite a movie buff.
I am. I love movies and television. Yeah.
And there are some other movie projects coming up for you.
There are, yes. I have a friend who we are in discussions about doing a video podcast about movies and TV. And our very first episode will be recorded next weekend. So stay tuned. We will definitely do some cross-linking because it's going to be about the Barbie movie compared to Poor Things, which I haven't seen yet. I'm going to be seeing it this week. Right. Emma Stone, apparently a really interesting movie and a bit of a kind of a strange feminist comparison, we might.
Okay, so you're going to be co-hosting on this podcast as well, whose name we don't have yet. Is that correct?
Yes, we don't have a name for the podcast yet, but we will definitely.
Okay, so as soon as we have it, I'll put it in the notes below.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because this really is your forte, isn't it?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I love talking about movies.
Yeah.
It's funny. I have this Virgo thing where it's like, I don't feel like I know enough. I'm not an expert, blah, blah, blah. There's going to be a lot of homework, but.
And yet, here you are.
We'll give it a try. It'll be fine. I'm sure
you'll be fine.
There are people who spout their opinions who have much less knowledge about things than I do.
You're doing great. I mean,
well, thanks.
I mean, you've even seen the movie. I mean, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that.
That's great. So that'll be coming soon, 2024. We'll give you more information on that as Arwynne develops her skills there as a movie buff.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for listening. And if you found value within this episode, please do consider sharing it with anybody who'd be interested.
Definitely. And our 75th episode is coming up. If you have questions, send them to us.
Oh, yes. And you can send your questions to Starzology@gmail.com. We'll be recording our 75th episode, which is always a Q&A every 25, and answering your astrology questions. So get those questions into us.
Yes, definitely.
Great.
Well, thanks for hosting.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here, and thanks for being with us, Arwynne. And to our listeners, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer or someone who's learning astrology or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.